A blind 17-year-old girl, alone, standing in the center of a warehouse in Seoul, surrounded by 12 armed men who have been sent to make sure she never leaves. She cannot see any of them, but she is not afraid, because she has spent 10 years memorizing the world through sound. And right now, in this room, in this darkness, with 12 men between her and the door, she can hear exactly where every one of them is standing. The drag of a right foot, the click of a safety being switched, the specific way a man breathes when he is about to move. The lights go out. She is already gone, not running, not stumbling, moving, calm, precise, unhesitating, through a building she has spent 2 days mapping in her mind, every corner memorized, every exit accounted for. 12 armed men are left standing in the dark while a blind girl walks out of a door they forgot to watch. Because they thought her blindness was the story. They had no idea her blindness was the weapon. This is Afro Soul Stories, and this is the story of Chisom Obi, the girl Lagos threw away, the girl a Korean mafia boss found in a hot marketplace while a song he thought he'd buried stopped him dead in his tracks. The girl who grew up inside the most dangerous empire in Seoul, listening to everything, forgetting nothing. And the girl who on one cold October night brought her father's greatest enemy to his knees, not with a gun, not with money, not with power borrowed from anyone else, with her mind, with her memory, with 10 years of quiet, magnificent preparation. Before we get to that night, we need to go back to Lagos, back to a marketplace that smelled of pepper and fear and the specific cruelty of a man who was supposed to be family, back to the worst morning of a 7-year-old girl's life and the most unexpected beginning she could never have imagined. Chisom Obi was not supposed to be in that marketplace. She was supposed to be in school. She was supposed to be the girl her parents dreamed her into being, the daughter of Chukwemeka and Nneka Obi, a middle-class couple in Surulere, Lagos, who were not rich but were full of laughter, full of music, full of the kind of love that fills a room the way sunlight fills water. You can't point to where it starts. Her father was a civil engineer. Her mother taught music at a secondary school in Agege and came home every evening smelling of chalk dust and joy. They had wanted 3 children. They got 1, and they poured everything they had, every dream, every prayer, every carefully saved naira into that 1. Chisom had been blind since birth, a complication during delivery that the doctors called rare and her parents called devastating, and then refused to call anything, because one Sunday morning when she was 3 years old, her mother sat beside her on the bed, took both her small hands in hers and said, "Chichi, your eyes don't work, but you work perfectly, so we are going to stop trying to fix what God made different, and we are going to start showing the world what you can do." From that day forward, Chisom became extraordinary in the most quiet way. She memorized her school textbooks by audio, then recited them back without error. She learned to navigate her entire neighborhood with her cane and the geography of sound. The way a mosque 3 streets over rang differently on Fridays, how the hawkers' voices moved in patterns that mapped the market's shape, how rain on a zinc roof told you exactly how large the building behind you was. She could walk into a room of strangers and identify within 60 seconds who was anxious, who was hiding something, who was telling the truth. Her teacher called her gifted. Her mother called her miracle. Her father called her his compass, because, he said, every time she asked why, "No matter how lost I am, you always point me home." She did not know then how much she would need to remember that, how hard she would hold on to it in the years to come, when home became something she had to build from scratch. The accident happened on a Tuesday in October, a wet road, a truck with failed brakes, a junction her father had crossed 1,000 times. He did not survive. Her mother held on for 11 days, and then she didn't. Chisom was 6 years old. Her uncle Emeka came from the east for the burial. He wore the right clothes, said the right prayers at the right moments. He cried in front of the right people. He held Chisum's hand at the graveside and told everyone he was going to take care of her, that blood looks after blood, that this was what family was for. Chisum felt something in his hand as he said it, not warmth, not grief, something she could not name yet at 6 years old. She would name it later, much later. Relief. Her uncle moved into her parents' house in Surulere, told the neighbors he was managing the estate. Within 4 months, the house was sold. Chisum was moved to a single room in a tenement in Mushin. Her school fees were no longer paid. When she asked, her uncle said, "Blind pikin no need school. School no go fit help you." So she stayed in the room. She cooked, she cleaned. She kept herself very, very still and very, very quiet, the way a person who cannot afford to make noise learns to be still. And she listened, because listening was the one thing nobody could take from her. She heard her uncle on the phone in the next room, late at night, speaking to someone she didn't know, about money, about buyers, about the trouble of keeping a blind child who was useless but still eating. She didn't react. She stored it, the way she stored everything. She waited. One morning, she had been in Mushin for just over a year. Her uncle woke her before dawn. "We are going to visit someone," he said, "a business partner. Put on the blue dress." The blue dress? Her mother had bought it for her birthday. Her uncle had never once cared what she wore. She put on the dress and she went. The marketplace was an assault of noise and heat and close bodies. She counted her footsteps from the car, stayed close to her uncle, mapped the corridors between stalls by the change in sound around her. Left turn, open space, the smell of dried fish, then textiles, then another left. Her uncle stopped. New voices appeared. Men, multiple men. Low tones, the kind used for transactions. She heard the word for price spoken in 3 ways across 30 seconds. And then, quietly, completely, she understood what kind of business this was. She was 7 years old. She understood everything. She did not scream. She did not beg. She had learned in Mushin that showing fear was an invitation for cruelty, and she was not going to give anyone that. So she did the only thing she could think of, the thing her mother had always done when the world became too heavy. She sang, softly, barely above a whisper, rising just barely above the noise. Chari chari chaya, uri aigi jaya ja. Her mother's song, the Korean lullaby. She didn't know what the words meant. Her mother had learned it from a Korean woman she'd befriended at the hospital during Chisum's birth, a woman who had sat outside the same ward for her own reasons, and the two of them had become something like friends in the way that people become friends when they're both afraid and trying not to show it. The woman went back to Korea eventually, but the song had stayed. Chisum had heard her mother sing it every single night of her life until there were no more nights. She had nothing else left of her, so she sang it. She didn't know, standing there in that marketplace in her blue birthday dress, that 3 stalls away, a man was about to hear those specific words in that specific melody and feel as though the ground had moved beneath his feet. In N days, and absolutely no business being anywhere near this particular street. But his car had taken an alternate route to avoid traffic, and he'd stepped out to stretch his legs, and then he heard it. He stopped walking before his mind gave his body permission to stop. Choi Moo-jin, his enforcer, a wide-shouldered man built like a side of beef with the permanent expression of someone who had just been handed bad news, almost walked into him. "Boss, meeting is 2 streets." Baek-jun removed Moo-jin's hand from his arm without looking at him, and he walked toward the sound. He didn't run, he never ran, but he moved with a kind of urgency he had not felt in 4 years, because that song, those specific words, that exact melody, had not existed in his world for 4 years. He had buried it with his wife. He had been certain, completely certain, that he would never hear it again. What he found was a girl in a blue dress, 7 years old, small in a way that made something tighten in his chest, standing perfectly still in a loose circle of men, her face tilted slightly skyward the way sightless people sometimes face the light they cannot see, as if it still calls to them, as if the body knows something the eyes have forgotten. She was not trembling. She was not begging. She was singing with the composure of someone who had already decided that if this was happening, she would meet it on her own terms. Baek-jun stood and watched her for a long moment. He was 38 years old. He had spent the last 20 years becoming a man that other men did not look directly at. He had done things that most people would not allow themselves to imagine. He had a reputation built on the fact that he did not feel, or if he did, no one ever lived to report it. He stood in a hot Lagos marketplace and felt something crack open in his chest so cleanly it was almost like relief. Mujin appeared at his shoulder, looked at the scene, looked at his boss, felt the air change. He had worked for this man for 14 years. He had seen him in boardrooms, in interrogation rooms, in the middle of operations that would rearrange the criminal geography of 3 countries. He had seen him do things he still didn't discuss with his wife. He had never seen this expression on his face. "Who owns this child?" Baek-jun said. His voice was quiet. In their world, his quiet voice was far more dangerous than his loud one. The men in the circle went very still. Chisam stopped singing. Her head tilted toward the new voice, precise and immediate, like a compass needle. Baek-jun did not purchase her. He was not a man without lines. He had done many things, but he did not buy human beings, and he was not going to start. What he did was simpler and more final. He looked at the uncle who had stepped forward, smiling, ready to negotiate with this obviously wealthy Korean stranger, and said very quietly 7 words. "Take whatever you have been paid and leave." Something about the way he said it made the uncle understand with complete physical clarity that this was not a negotiation. He left. Baek-jun crouched down to the girl's level. She had stopped singing the moment he spoke. Her whole body was oriented toward him now. She was listening to him with every part of herself. "You're safe," he said. His Yoruba was approximately 3 words. That was one of them. She turned her face toward him, directly, precisely, like she could see him. "Your Yoruba is terrible," she said, in English, flatly. Behind him, Mujin choked on air. Baek-jun stared at her, 7 years old, just sold by the one person left who was supposed to protect her, and her first words to the man who'd interrupted it were a language critique. Something happened in his expression. If anyone who knew him had seen it, they would not have been able to name it, but it was warm. "What is your name?" he said. "Chisam. It means God follows me." "Does he?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "He must. I'm still here." He took her to his hotel. He ordered food. He sat in the chair across from her and watched her feel the edges of every dish on the tray with her fingertips before she touched anything, mapping it, categorizing it, making it hers. He asked questions. She answered them. No tears, no performance, just facts, delivered with the clean, almost businesslike composure of a child who had cried enough already and was done with it. Her parents were dead. Her uncle had sold her. She had no remaining family. She had not attended school in over a year. She could count, navigate, cook, clean, and memorize any space she was given enough time to explore. She liked mathematics and music. She did not like being pitied. "I am not going to pity you," Baek-jun said. "Good," she said. "Then we will get along." Mujin was standing by the door. He looked at the ceiling for a long time. He arranged emergency documentation through his Lagos contact that night. He did not ask himself why. He did not examine it. He simply did it, the same way he had walked toward her voice in the marketplace. His body understood something his mind was still catching up to. She flew to Seoul on a private plane. The seat was larger than any piece of furniture in the Mushin room. She ran her hands over every surface with quiet fascination, the window ledge, the seams of the leather, the raised logo on the tray. She was not overwhelmed, she was cataloging. "What does it look like?" she asked. Her voice was matter-of-fact, not wistful, curious. "What?" said Baek-jun. "Outside, the sky. I can hear that we are very high." He looked out the window. He had not actually looked at the sky from a plane in years. It had become wallpaper to him, background noise. But she asked it like it mattered, so he looked. "Dark blue," he said slowly, "almost purple. Stars above us. The clouds are beneath us, white and flat like a floor, and below that, the city lights. They look like scattered coins across dark cloth. She was quiet for a moment. "That's beautiful," she said. "Yes," he said, and turned back to his work. But for a moment, before he did, he had seen it too, properly seen it for the first time in years, through her ears. His compound in Sangbuk Dong was a fortress built to look like an estate. High walls, camera arrays disguised as garden lighting, 16 men on rotating security shifts. It was built for power and designed for threat. It was not designed for a 7-year-old girl from Lagos. His housekeeper, Mrs. O, a woman of 60 who had run this compound with the precision of a military campaign for 15 years, stood at the entrance and looked at the child beside him with an expression that communicated without words, "In 15 years, this is the strangest thing you have done." "She'll need a room," Becky June said. "Nearest to the main corridor, no obstacles from the door to the bed to the window. Same layout every single day. Nobody moves her things before telling her first. If something changes in this house, she is told before it changes, not after." Mrs. O looked at the girl. The girl looked back at her, or rather, faced her, chin level, with the expression of a head of state at a formal greeting. "Hello," said Chisom. "You smell like ginger root and lemon floor wax. Your floors must be very clean." Mrs. O blinked twice. Something in her severe face shifted slowly, like ice beginning to consider spring. "They are," she said. "Come, I'll show you your room."
For the first 3 months, Baek Ai-jun maintained his distance. This was temporary, he told himself. He was sourcing a better placement, a trusted foster family, a school equipped for visual impairment, a proper, stable, appropriate life. She was not his responsibility beyond what he had already done. He was a single man who ran a criminal empire. This was not a situation. He told himself this approximately 17 times a day. And every evening, without intending to, he found himself pausing outside her room, because she narrated herself, moved through the compound talking under her breath, 8 steps, corner left, wall texture changes here, cedar smell means the cabinet, 3 books stacked in height order, building an internal map with words as the building material. She asked Mrs. O 40 questions per day, minimum, and remembered the answers of all of them and never asked the same one twice. She had memorized the layout of the main house by the end of her first week and was navigating it faster than staff members who had worked there for years. And she was learning Korean at a speed that made Park Ji-yeon, the university student he'd hired as a language tutor, arrive for their weekly debriefing looking quietly devastated. "She corrected my pronunciation today," Park reported. And she was right. Baek Ai-jun looked at him for a moment. "Double her lesson hours," he said. "She's bored." The night everything became irreversible happened 4 months in. He came home late, well past midnight, from a meeting that had taken 3 hours longer than planned and ended badly. He wanted his study, his whiskey, and silence. He was walking down the second corridor when he heard it. Piano, coming from the room at the end, the room he had not entered in 4 years. Choppy, exploratory, someone learning by touch rather than sight, finding each key by sound, pressing, listening, moving to the next, building something note by careful, deliberate note. He pushed the door open. Chisum was at the piano, Park Ji-soo's piano, his late wife's instrument, in the room his late wife had called hers, on the bench where she had sat every Sunday morning until there were no more Sunday mornings. Chisum had not been told the significance of this room. He had simply never mentioned it, and no one on his staff had been brave enough to. She hadn't heard him come in. Her face was turned slightly down toward the keys, the expression of absolute concentration that he was already at 4 months, learning to recognize as her working face, the face she made when the world was a problem to be solved, and she was solving it. And then, without warning, without preparation, she found it. His wife's lullaby, note by note, slow and searching, but exactly right, exactly right. Baek Ai-jun had stood in rooms in 20 years and felt nothing move in him. He stood in the doorway of his late wife's music room and could not take a single step. And then he was on his knees. He did not decide to go to his knees. They just went. Chisum stopped.
listened, tilted her head toward the doorway. "You're crying," she said, not unkind, just certain. "I'm not," he said. "Okay," she said, gently, the way you agree with someone who needs you to. "What is this song? My mother used to sing it." He took a long time to answer. "My wife used to sing it." She sat very still on the bench, turned back toward the piano, and then, "Is she gone too?" "Yes." A silence that was not empty. It was full of two people's losses sitting in the same room together, recognizing each other. "I think," Chisholm said slowly, "that they sent us to each other." And she played the lullaby again, all the way through, both hands, as if she had always known it. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Baek-ai-jun was still on the floor of the doorway. He was the head of the most significant criminal organization in South Korea. He had accounts in 4 countries and men on 3 continents who answered to his name. And he sat on the floor in the dark because a 7-year-old girl from Lagos had said the truest thing he had heard in 4 years. After a long time, he said, "Do you want to stay?" She considered it carefully. She always considered things carefully. "Will you teach me things?"
Yes. Will you lie to me? No. Will you ever sell me? The word hit like a stone dropped into still water. He felt it spread through his chest. The weight of what her uncle had done, the weight of what this child had survived, the audacity and the heartbreak inside one single question. "Never," he said. "Not for anything in this world." She nodded, satisfied, completely satisfied, the way only someone who is very good at knowing when a person means what they say can be satisfied. "Then yes," she said, "I want to stay." She called him Appa by accident 6 months later. She was in the kitchen. She'd misjudged the handle of a pot and burned her palm on the side of it, and she cried out, "Appa!" and froze so completely that even the burned hand stopped mattering. The kitchen went silent. Mujin was at the table, eating. He placed his chopsticks down with tremendous care. Baek-ai-jun lowered the newspaper he was reading. He looked at her. She was standing completely still with one hand over her mouth, waiting for the correction, for the distance to be reestablished, for the reminder of what this was and wasn't. "Go run cold water on your hand and be more careful near the stove," Baek-ai-jun said. No correction, no distance. She exhaled, walked to the sink. The conversation moved on. Mujin sat at that table with his chopsticks on the table and did not say a single word because he had been told not to. But when he drove home that night, he smiled the entire way. His wife asked what he was so happy about. "Nothing," he said, and smiled all the way through dinner. Years passed the way years do, quickly when you're not watching, and permanently once they're gone. Chisom grew up inside that compound the way a plant grows toward its particular kind of light. In her case, the light was sound. She reached toward every voice, every meeting, every exchange, absorbing, storing, categorizing, growing not taller but deeper, more roots than height, the kind of strength you don't see until something tries to pull it up. Baek-ai-jun educated her. He was deliberate about it. He had made a decision, conscious, thought through, that if she was going to live in his world, she was going to understand his world, not participate in it, understand it, know how power moved, how information was weaponized, who was dangerous, and what made them so. He taught her chess, and she beat him at it within 18 months. He taught her the principles of negotiation, and she used them on Mrs. O to negotiate additional dessert privileges with a precision that left a housekeeper slightly dazed. She took on Korean like a second skin, not just fluent, but native. Within 3 years, no one who heard her voice on the phone would know. She added Mandarin at 12 because 2 of Baek-ai-jun's most significant Taiwanese partners spoke it at the dinner table when they thought no one important was listening. They forgot she was there. She was always there. She learned mixed martial arts from Mujin, who had been instructed by Baek-ai-jun to modify the training for a blind fighter. This turned out to be, in retrospect, like training a shark to swim in the dark. She had no visual cues to override, no habit of watching hands, no reflex to track eyes. She fought entirely by sound, breath, and touch. She could hear a man shift his weight 3 meters away and know which foot he was about to lead with. Sighted opponents consistently underestimated her because they looked at her and saw limitation.
They understood their mistake approximately 4 seconds later. By 15, Mujin refused to spar with her at full intensity. "You're afraid of me," she told him, pleasantly. "I am 46 years old. I am protecting my joints. You're afraid of me. Training session is over." She smiled and went to play the piano. The shadow over those years had a name, King Seolwa. She arrived when Chisam was 13. Beautiful, socially precise, from a family whose name opened doors. She had decided Baek-ai-jun was her most interesting project yet, and she pursued him with the systematic energy of a woman who did not recognize no as a terminal answer. Baek-ai-jun tolerated her because she was connected and useful. He was not cruel to her. He was not, however, warm. Seolwa understood within the first month that the obstacle was not his late wife's memory. It was the blind African girl who sat at the dinner table and described the color of your soul more accurately than any mirror. She hated Chisam with a quiet, disciplined venom. She was careful about it. Never anything open, never anything provable, just small cruelties, forgetting to mention meal times, leaving doors in different positions without announcement. Once and only once, she let a heavy door swing back faster than it should have when Chisam was walking through it. Chisam hit the doorframe with her shoulder, said nothing, noted the sound of Seolwa's footsteps receding, noted the pause in them, half a beat. That was not an apology, but was an acknowledgement. She adapted. She always adapted. She added Seolwa's patterns to her mental model of the house and worked around them, the way water works around stone. And she waited. She had been waiting since she was 6 years old. She was very good at it. She said one thing to Baek-ai-jun about Seolwa exactly once. She was 14. They were eating dinner, just the two of them, Seolwa having gone home early. "She talks about herself in a way that assumes the future includes her," Chisam said without preamble. "But she watches you like someone calculating how long they have before the investment stops paying." A pause. "She doesn't love you. She loves what you represent." Baek-ai-jun was quiet for a moment. "That's an astute observation for a 14-year-old. "I'm blind," said Chisam. "I have nothing to look at except people." He smiled. He didn't smile often. When he did, it was always because of her. Seolwa was gone from their lives within the year. Nobody threw her out. She simply found, gradually, that there was no foothold remaining, and she was not a woman who wasted effort on the impossible. She left. Chisam never mentioned it. There was something else growing in those years, something larger and darker and approaching. Baek-ai-jun's empire had a problem. His name was Nam Do-won. 50 years old, former military intelligence, a man who had learned in 25 years of operations that the cleanest way to destroy something was not explosively, but erosively, slow, patient, like water on limestone. You don't see the damage until the cave-in. For 3 years, Nam Do-won had been moving against Baek-ai-jun. Small things, a shipment delayed here, a business associate quietly pressured there, a partner who switched sides and couldn't explain why. Nothing traceable, nothing that could be taken to the consortium and named. Baek-ai-jun knew. He couldn't prove it, and in their world, proof was everything. "He's building to something final," Mujin said one night in the study, late. The kind of late where the house is quiet and men speak in lower tones because the dark makes honesty easier. "The consortium summit, next month. Every major player in the region. If something happened to me there, if my position was challenged, if evidence was presented that removed me from the table, then everything becomes negotiable," Mujin finished, and he steps in as the solution. They sat with it. What neither of them noticed was that Chisam was in the corner of the study, ostensibly completing her advanced correspondence studies, her laptop open, her head bowed over it. She heard every word. She had been hearing these conversations for 10 years. She had, over time, built a complete internal map of the house, every alliance, every tension, every name that carried danger. She had done this deliberately and privately, and she had never mentioned it because she was not yet certain what to do with it. She was becoming certain now, because she had heard a name in Mujin's account that he had passed over quickly, a footnote, a minor detail. Nam Do-won's personal secretary, a man named Lee Hyun-chel. She had heard that voice before, once, 2 years ago, in this compound, in a meeting she was not supposed to know about. She filed this, carefully, and she waited. Because if Nam Do-won had a man in this compound 2 years ago, that man was still here, still listening, still feeding information out, and Baek-jun had no idea. That was the piece he didn't know he was missing. That was what she was going to hand him.
The right moment came uninvited, the way the most important moments always do. 3 days before the consortium summit, Chisum was returning from her weekly piano lesson at a music school 3 blocks from the compound. One of the few solo journeys Baek-jun permitted. She had walked the route more times than she could count, and Mujin's people always followed at a distance she could hear and chose not to mention. They didn't follow closely enough. The team that took her was professional, coordinated. They neutralized Mujin's surveillance first, quickly, quietly, leaving no noise to trigger an alert, and then they came for her. She heard the first man's footsteps at 40 meters, identified the coordination, the synchronized pause of multiple people at 30, knew she was surrounded at 20. She kept walking, cane tapping, even pace, relaxed shoulders, nothing on her face, because she needed to know who sent them, and to know that, she needed them to speak first. They drove for 22 minutes. She counted every second, tracked every turn with the concentration of someone who understands that information is the only currency that doesn't run out. South, southwest, then east, then south again. The smell changed, away from residential, toward industrial, river air, concrete echo quality, warehouses. She was not blindfolded. They had not thought to blindfold her because they made the mistake that everyone who underestimated her made. They saw blindness as an already existing blindfold. She walked through the building they brought her to and built the map in her mind as she walked. High ceiling, the echo quality told her, 20 meters minimum, concrete floors, solid, some grit, large open space, then corridor, then a smaller room with a lower acoustic ceiling. She counted the people in that room by breathing patterns and weight distribution on the floor. 5 people, 3 to her left, 1 to her right, 1 seated directly ahead. 2 exits, the door she entered, and 1 to her left. She knew it was there because the air moved differently from that direction. A gap, a door not fully closed. A chair was placed behind her knees. She sat, and then a voice. Older, precise diction, the measured delivery of a man who has given commands for so long that authority is just his natural speaking register. "Chisum Obi," said Nam Do-won, "I have wanted to meet you for a very long time." He was almost polite. This was the thing about truly dangerous people. They were often very polite. They offered her water. He sat across a table she estimated at 1.5 meters wide and explained the situation to her clearly, as if she were a reasonable person he wanted to ensure was well informed. He intended to hold her until the summit concluded, 3 days. Not to harm her, he was very clear about that, simply as insurance, because Baek-jun would not risk her safety by doing anything precipitous at the summit, and that restraint was all Nam Do-won needed. "The man loves you," Nam Do-won said, with the tone of someone noting a factual weakness. "And love, Miss Obi, makes excellent leverage." She listened to all of this. Then she asked one question. "What happens to me after the summit?" Silence, a long one. "I thought so," she said. She said nothing else about that. She had already, before they took her phone, sent a compressed audio file to Mujin's encrypted line, a recording of her surroundings from the moment she heard the first footstep at 40 meters. Every turn, every sound of the journey, the shift in air quality as they moved from residential to industrial, the river smell, the concrete echo. A protocol Baek-jun installed in her phone when she was 15, when she'd first started making solo journeys, and tested exactly once. She had never told him he knew about it. Her phone was confiscated 3 minutes after she arrived. The message was already delivered.
The recording was enough to narrow the district, but not the exact building. There were 11 warehouses within range of the river air she'd described. Mujin was working through them systematically. She needed to buy him time. Now she needed to learn the building, learn the people, and stay useful while he narrowed it down. She needed to stall. She was, as it happened, extraordinarily good at stalling. For 2 days, she was the perfect captive, cooperative, quiet, slightly dazed seeming. She ate when food was brought. She asked Mrs. O-type questions, the kind that seemed harmless but were extracting data. How many people were in the building, where the generator was, where the exits led, how long the shifts ran. Her guards changed every 6 hours. She mapped each rotation by voice and footstep. There were 12 men in the building. Namdawan's left flank was intentionally lighter. He had moved 2 of his usual guards to cover the main entrance when Mujin's vehicles appeared on the perimeter feed. She had heard the radio chatter from the room where they'd moved her, even through 2 walls and a heavy door. She had very good ears. She had felt the forged documents that afternoon when she had knocked them off the table by accident and was allowed to put them back. Felt the watermark, the embossed texture of it, pressed into the paper, on the left side of the page. She had enough experience with official consortium documents to know it should be on the right. She was building her exit in the only material available to her, knowledge. The crack in the armor was a guard named Jung-Soo, 32 years old, Busan accent. She heard it when he thought no one was paying attention, the vowels lengthening. Footstep with a slight drag on the right, old knee injury, she estimated, likely from his 20s. He checked his phone every 3 hours at almost exactly the same interval. Not a news app. The repetition and the timing said something else, a monitoring app. Something you watched through the night. She waited until he brought her dinner on the second night. "You're from Busan," she said. He stopped moving. "How?" She set her chopsticks down precisely. "I'm not your enemy, Jung-Soo. I don't even know who your real enemies are. I just know that you check a monitor app every 3 hours, which means someone you love needs watching." A pause. "New baby?" Silence. Then, 4 months. She nodded. "She's lucky you're paying attention." A long pause. The sound of a large man deciding something. "What do you want?" he said. "I want you to think about where you want to be standing in 3 days, because I'm leaving this building regardless. The only question is whether you're here when that happens or somewhere safe with your daughter." She picked up her chopsticks and ate. He left without another word. But she heard, very faintly, the sound of a key in a different lock, the secondary exit door, being quietly tested. On the night of the consortium summit, at 10:43 p.m., the building's external power was cut. Not by Mujin's team, by Jung-Soo, who had made his decision. In the 6 seconds between external power loss and generator activation, 6 seconds of complete darkness, Shisum was already on her feet. She moved through the building without hesitation, not carefully, not slowly, decisively. Every step placed exactly where she had mapped it over 2 days. Every corner anticipated, every door accounted for. She reached the first guard in the corridor before the generator lit, because she had counted his footsteps all day and knew, to within half a meter, exactly where he would be standing when the lights went out. She had trained for this. Not for this specific warehouse, this specific night, but for this, for the moment when there was no light and the only thing that mattered was what you had learned while everyone thought you were helpless. She was 17 years old, blind from birth, trained in the dark by a man who loved her, and a world that had repeatedly tried to break her. She moved through Nam Do-won's building like she had lived in it for years. She reached the secondary exit at 10:44. The door opened into night air, cold, south-facing. The smell of the Han River was exactly where she'd calculated it. She activated the emergency signal on her bracelet, the piece of jewelry Baek E-jun had given her on her 15th birthday, plain enough that no one looked twice at it. She stood in the cold outside the warehouse and waited. Mujin's team found her 40 meters from the building. He got out of the lead vehicle, he walked to her. He was, and this was unusual enough that she noted it and filed it, breathing differently than normal, tighter. "Are you hurt?" he said. "I'm fine," she said. "Namdo-wan is still inside with 11 men, Jung-soo is already gone, and he took the secondary exit with him, which means that side of the building is uncovered." She paused. "More importantly, he's planning to use the summit tonight to present forged documents that implicate Appa in a consortium violation. It would strip his position and open everything to challenge." Mujin stared at her. "The documents are in a gray case on the main table. The watermark is on the left side of the page instead of the right. That's how you identify them as forgeries." She tilted her head. "I felt them yesterday. You have maybe 40 minutes before Appa's name is called at the summit. Go." She paused. "One more thing." And Mujin, Lee Hyun-chul, Namdo-wan's personal secretary, his voice was inside our compound 2 years ago, in the East meeting room during the Busan consolidation. He was never on our staff list. She let that land. "There's been a mole. Was a mole, past tense, because now you know. Deal with it quietly after the summit. Don't tell Appa until it's handled. He has enough to carry tonight." Mujin Choi, 14 years with this organization, 50 operations, a man who feared very little and showed less, stood in the cold night air and did not move for 3 full seconds. He was staring at her with an expression she could not see but could feel somehow, the quality of his stillness, the changed rate of his breathing. "Go, Uncle Mujin," she said softly. "I know exactly where I am. I'll be fine." He went. Baek E-jun received the call at 11:07 p.m. He was in the summit hall. His name was 12 minutes from being called. He stepped into the corridor. He listened. He asked 2 questions. He went back inside. At 11:19, Namdo-wan stood before the consortium and opened his gray case. He laid the documents on the table with the confidence of a man who has prepared for a long time and finally delivering on that preparation. He began to speak. Baek E-jun requested the floor. He presented the authentication analysis, assembled in under 11 minutes by his document specialist, who had been on standby since the moment Mujin's call ended. The consortium's own authenticator examined the documents. The watermark was on the wrong side of the page. The room went very quiet. Namdo-wan, for the first time in his life, had nothing to say. He was removed from the hall, then from the consortium, then from everything he had spent 20 years building, because when that kind of man falls, he falls completely, every alliance recalibrated, every loyal person suddenly unavailable, every structure suddenly unsupported, because a blind girl had knocked a folder off a table. Baek E-jun came home at 2:17 a.m. The house was dark. It should have been quiet. It wasn't. Piano, coming from the music room at the end of the second corridor. He stood in the hallway and listened for a moment, and then he walked toward it, the same way he had walked toward a voice in a Lagos marketplace 10 years ago, before his mind gave permission, before he knew why. He stood in the doorway. She heard him. She always heard him. She kept playing. He waited until the last note fell into silence.
"You could have told me," he said. "What you knew, what you'd heard. You didn't have to go into that building alone." "You would have locked the compound down," she said, "and they would have found another method. I needed to control the situation from the inside." A pause. "It was mine to handle. I had everything I needed." He was quiet for a moment. "Were you afraid?" She considered this honestly, with the seriousness she gave everything. "For about 40 seconds, she said, "when they first took me, and then I started working." She placed her hands lightly on the cheese. "Fear is information. It tells you the stakes. Once you know the stakes, you can make a plan." He sat down on the piano bench beside her. He was a very large man, and the bench was narrow, and she shifted to make room without being asked. "She would have loved you,"
he said. She knew exactly who he meant. She had always known. I know, she said. I feel her in this room. I think she's part of why I'm so good at listening. She was quiet for a moment. You loved her very much. Yes. And you love me very much. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that someone who didn't know him might have thought he wasn't going to answer, but she knew. She knew the difference between avoidance and wait. This was wait, the weight of someone choosing words carefully because the words were going to matter for a long time. Yes, said Baekhyun. Differently, but yes, very much. She smiled, and she played the lullaby. Their lullaby, the one that had started everything, in a hot marketplace in Lagos, on the worst morning of a 7-year-old girl's life, when she had nothing left to hold on to but a song her mother had learned from a stranger, and a stranger heard it and stopped. Outside, Seoul was dark and sleeping. Inside, a man who had spent 20 years becoming someone who did not feel sat on a piano bench beside the girl who had spent 10 years teaching him to remember how, and together, they were two halves of something that neither of them had a name for, because the name was family, and family was the one thing in both their lives that had kept breaking, and they had both, carefully and improbably, learned to build it from what was left. He made it almost to the end of the song before his breathing changed. She heard it. She always heard it. She kept playing and did not say a word because she was kind that way. And that is the story of Chisum Obi, the girl nobody wanted, the girl a marketplace tried to sell and a song refused to let go, the girl who grew up inside the most dangerous empire in Seoul and listened to everything until she understood it better than the men who built it. She did not get her sight back. She did not need it. She already saw more than anyone in every room she walked into. She saw in the way that only people who have been forced to find light in complete darkness can see, all the way through to what things actually are. She went on to study international law at Yonsei University, graduated first in her class, spent the next decade taking everything Baekhyun had built and making it untouchable, not through force, but through structure, through the same patient, methodical, long-game thinking that had allowed her to spend 2 days in an enemy warehouse and come out with everything she needed. Namdoan never rebuilt, Uncle Emeka was never found, and every Sunday morning, without fail, in a compound in Sungbukdong that had once been built only for power, Chisum sat at a piano in a room that smelled faintly of someone else's love story and played a lullaby that belonged to all of them, to her mother who taught it to her, to his wife who sang it in this room, to the marketplace where two grief-shaped people heard the same song and found each other, and the man who was always, somehow, in the doorway. She never commented on his breathing. She was kind that way. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss what we bring next. Like this video and tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. Was it the marketplace, the piano room, or the moment she asked, "Will you ever sell me?" I want to know. Until next time, God follows us all.